My name is Julius Duncan. I'm a director at social brand agency Headstream. Over the last few weeks we've been running some seminars and briefings in London for big companies who are concerned about looking after their reputation in the social age. So for those who couldn't make it, we wanted to share what we've been discussing, show you a little bit of our thinking, some of the models we've developed and where we think things are going next in terms of looking after social reputation. So without further ado, into the slides. Kicking off, we've got a selection of 10 very big, very global brands, and the quiz question that we've been posing is, what do all of these brands have in common? And the answer is, they've all been impacted by a reputational crisis which has either started in social media or been massively amplified by social media in just the last year or so. And the really interesting part of it is that if you take 7 out of those 10 instances, they could not have happened before social media. It was the enabling effect of social media that meant the reputational damage was done. So something's going on here, and something that we've been looking into and studying into quite a lot of detail. We've got an image here which shows how messaging used to get out to the public, what was being called the old world. On the left hand side we've got the organisation and all the information within that organisation. Then you've got a team of professional communicators, maybe a PR department, that filter down, winnow, make perfect the messaging that then squeezed out to a few big media outlets who would then in turn tell that story to the public. That was the old way. You can see that this is in process of being turned on its head. Instead of a gatekeeper role, we've now got the PR or the communicators over to the left hand side of the diagram, and the media are over to the right. And what's happening in the middle is what's really important. There's now a complete permeable wall between the organisation, where now every individual has the power to publish because of social media, and the public themselves. There's a direct contact between them. And going forward, does the PR or the comms team become actually a training facility and a coaching facility for the organisation to make everybody a communicator? And we're going to see the media catching up with the stories that are already existing in social spaces and amongst the public who have seen it direct from the organisation. So if that's what's happening in terms of mechanics, if you like, and the enablement that social media has given everyone to be a publisher, how does that affect you if you're looking after reputation? What happens when the reputational clouds start coming in and you have to do all of this a lot faster than you might normally? Well, we've been taking a look at the features that have really changed over the last 10 years. So again, looking back at the old way of doing things, we can see that for our argument is that crisis communications, reputation communications hasn't changed for the last 550 years. That's since that date there, 1450 to 2000. 1450 was when the Gutenberg printing press was invented. Since that time, there were acknowledged and established means of messages getting out to the general public. So that was newspapers, that was television channels, and then latterly the internet. And in that world it was much easier to manage reputation. As a professional communicator, you could look after the brand of your organisation, which is represented by the little pot plant in the greenhouse. You could nurture it, and through your good reputation management and media management skills, you could in some ways protect it. Yes, you had to deal with a news cycle that got increasingly fast over the years, but you still knew when the 24-hour bulletin was coming up on the hour. Yes, you had to deal with opinion, but the opinion was very much influenced by powerful voices in the newspapers and media. And what was really interesting is that those interested publics who are represented underneath the brand, if you like, the groundswell of opinion, there might have been a lot of people out there who weren't particularly happy about what you were doing, but without a voice, unless they were having it amplified for them by mainstream media, which was unlikely, you could actually not have to take too much notice of that interested public or the general public. Let's wind the clock forward and come into the present day. What's happened is the game has been upped. There's a lot more for a communicator and a manager of reputation to deal with. We've brought it down to forces of social nature, and these are, first of all, that all of this is happening in real time. Yes, we had 24-hour news channels and online publishing, but you still knew where things were going to appear and when they might appear, or when at least they were scheduled in the hour. Now this can blossom, grow, mushroom throughout the network of social media, and there's no way to predict how and when it's going to happen, but you know it's going to happen very quickly. Secondly, and absolutely crucially, is emotion. There's a lot more emotion involved in these crises now. In the old days, whilst somebody might have given a quote to a newspaper, it was still filtered through a professional news gatherer, it was still published with potentially a right to reply next to it or some balance. Now the individual just vents all of their emotions straight out onto their page or onto their profile, and it's completely and utterly unfiltered. Next, we've got interaction. So what does that mean? Well, interaction is when the people involved actually start to create the story themselves, and that's because we've got the means to publish, plus it's increasingly simple to create graphics, for example, online. So with the case of BP, earlier this year we saw a competition launched online to create a fitting logo for BP in the Gulf of Mexico. So we had black logos instead of green, we had skull and crossbones, we had the BP flower covered in black footprints. And that became the story into the mainstream press. So people are actually producing their own content and interacting much more proactively. And finally, and probably most crucially, what you've got is now, instead of just interested publics that you can look at and hope that they don't have too much influence over the mainstream media, you've now got a global community that can be mobilised and that can surface its opinions through social media and do so really, really, really effectively. So there's a big constituency there you need to think about. And the reason the roots are growing in there from the brand of the organisation is that if there's one thing you should do, then you should start to think about that community, how you could become part of it, so that if something did happen to your reputation, you may have some advocacy or a level of understanding amongst that community that could help you protect yourself. We've had quite a lot of doom and gloom there, quite a lot of new things to deal with, but it's also worth pointing out that there's massive opportunity in this new world, and that comes before and after any crisis. What you can see on the left-hand side there is the ripple of noise online as an issue begins to build towards a crisis, and those grey spots represent some opportunity points where you could come in and diffuse it before it even gets to crisis levels. So for example, Capri Sun was one of the brands we had at the beginning. They were recently attacked by somebody who found a disgusting object inside a Capri Sun pouch, and that was online for 10 days before it really burst into the public consciousness. And that bursting onto the public consciousness is represented by the red point there, or the tipping point, whereby this becomes something so large it's affecting your ability to do business and therefore is a genuine crisis. What Capri Sun could have done if they'd been listening properly was identify the issue early on and resolved it, and it may never have got to the point that it did. It was only because speculation was allowed to run rife that it became a much bigger issue. Similarly, after the crisis, you've now got an ability to track much more accurately what people are saying about you online. So there's much more measurability than in the old days, and you can take advantage of being high profile for the wrong reasons to flip that around and find the opportunity to become high profile for the right reasons and show that you're responding in the right way. So in summary there on the three sections of that slide, as if you're listening actively, and then you're responding appropriately, and then finally you're learning from it, then those are some of the good principles that you should apply to make the most of the ability that social media gives us to really understand what's going on. Online and social reputation is a tricky area, but as with a lot of reputation management, it really does come down to preparation. And there are three things that we see that you should do to protect and enhance your reputation. First is have a strategy, know what you're going to do, be prepared, know who's going to do what, when, if a crisis hits. Make sure you're listening carefully. Once you put your listening in place, do that really actively so you can get on top of any issues straight away, and you can turn detractors to advocates and prevent that crisis ever happening. If you are unfortunate that the crisis does hit, or it's a crisis that's out of your control that's being amplified in social media, make sure you've trained the right people to respond with the right tone of voice on the right platforms to diffuse the crisis and then turn it around to your advantage. And in that way, seek the opportunity, because there is opportunity out there, the opportunity that social reputation gives us. So that's our thinking on social reputation. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to watch. If you'd like to know more, if you'd like to get in touch, you can do so at Twitter or through my blog or through the email address at Headstream, and all those contact details are coming up. Thanks again.